Hey everybody, it's Kristen Dokas, and you are listening to Conversations on the Rocks, the podcast that is as random as the thoughts that rumble through my head like tumbleweed in Texas. I'm super excited. I have Blythe Alpern with me today, and she's a copywriter, but most importantly, she is the host of the Gen X Experience podcast, which I was on a few weeks ago, and we're going to talk about Gen X stuff, y'all. So if you're not Gen X, you can dip out now, or you can listen and learn to find out why we are the F around and find out generation. Blythe, please introduce yourself.
Hello, yes, I am Blythe Alpern. I'm a copywriter and a proud Gen Xer. I'm actually turning the big 50 next month, and I'm actually excited for it, unlike when I was turning 30.
Right?
So,
30 was a mind, it was a mind, you know what, and then...
Yeah, I was like having a mental breakdown, basically, and my mother was like, get over yourself. So,
girl, I wish I was turning 30.
Yes. Yeah. Sometimes I'm like, can I go back there and just smack myself and be like, be happy to be 30. And also, here's a few guys that you should not date. And a few jobs you should not take.
Dear past Blythe, future Blythe has some good advice for you. Excuse me.
She does.
Talk a little bit about your podcast.
So I've been a podcast fan before, for at least a decade. I got into them very early, and I never thought about having one until a few years ago. Maybe I guess during the pandemic when we all had lots of ideas, and I was like, you know what? There's not really a place for Gen X. Like there are some Gen X podcasts, but they're mostly about pop culture or looking back at movies. I'm like, I want a place for us to come on and, commiserate, bitch, complain, be snarky, and talk about the things that are affecting being in midlife, and then mix that with a little bit of nostalgia, because it is fun to look back at the 80s and the 90s and the 70s and just reminisce about the good old days before social media.
Right. All of us, I think, can definitely say, and I've told my girls this because everyone knows I've got 3 young adult children. I am so glad we did not have all of this when we were growing up, especially being latchkey kids. Can you imagine with the crap that we got into? And oh my God, can you imagine the worst thing we had was somebody passing a note in the 8th grade and then getting popped by the teacher and having to read it out loud. That was the worst thing. I just can't imagine. And I feel sorry. And one of the things that I have done in the past, I don't do it so much anymore, is coaching parents on social media, because it is just a completely different growing up situation when you're dealing with having the technology and the social media involved in it. So what you just said is a great segue to what you and I said that we were going to talk about, and that is Gen X. And I'm going to make a mashup of Gen X and the importance of self-care. And what I think is fascinating is, and we touched on this a little bit when you and I had our conversation on your show, is that it's such it was a completely foreign concept to our mothers, who mostly are baby boomers. So we didn't grow up with a good, and I'm not saying our moms weren't good role models, but we didn't grow up with a good example of putting our priorities first. So let's talk a little bit about priorities, self-care, boundaries, all of which, I might add, we had to teach ourselves.
Yes, yeah, because it's funny, my mom worked, she basically ran the show of my dad's office and our family and everything else, and she would always tell my sister and my brother and I, you can be whatever you want and be independent, but then she didn't put herself first ever. It was the family, it was my dad's business. And I remember looking at that and going, I love my mom, she's amazing, but I don't want to become that where I put myself last. That's easier said than done.
It is.
And it really took, it really took, from 2015 to 2020, my parents both were sick and they both subsequently passed away. And I looked at myself in the mirror after losing my dad, and I was like, what? I don't like what I see. I don't like the way I'm looking. I was exhausted emotionally, physically. I'm like, I need to take care of myself because I'm in my 40s. And if I don't do something now, what am I going to be like in my 50s and 60s and 70s? And it was a physical thing and also like a mental and emotional, spiritual, everything. I just kind of was like, I need to do something so I can feel better. And because I was still grieving, which a grief never goes away. So I needed an outlet for, also it was the pandemic. So like we all were going completely insane. So I just started making choices to better take care of myself in small ways and in bigger ways.
And some people, we're kind of raised in a sense of self-care is selfish, is what, so you have to put everybody first. If you are a woman, your spouse, your children, the grocery store person, the mailman, your job, everything came first. And if you try to stand up and say, you know what, I don't know about you, my mom never took a trip by herself or with her friends, ever. And you just, if you don't do that, if you don't do these things, you're going to, and it's so true, you can't pour from an empty cup. You have to pour from the saucer.
True.
And it takes a lot. And you're right. I think a lot of that, my dad passed away thank God, in 2019. Not thank God that he died, but thank God he passed away before COVID hit, because we would have never survived that. But it was that was a big wake-up call. Turning 40 was I have no more filter. I'm going to stop pretending to put a filter in place. And then turning 50 was kind of like a badass, I am woman, hear me roar kind of thing. But it also kind of coincides with that whole, wow, we're not even midlife anymore. We're past midlife. And, it was a very shocking revelation to me that I went, oh shit, it's autumn. It's not summer anymore. It's autumn. Winter is coming.
Yep, I've lived half my life. What's the next part of it gonna look like? And
you can find yourself getting bogged down by that, and it can become very depressing. You can go, gosh, at best,
yes.
I might have 20. I'm 55. I turned 55 last year, and I'm like, I hope I've got another 20 in me. I'd like to have another 25 in me, but you don't know. And so if you continue to, go around and do all the things for everybody else but you, what kind of existence is that?
It's, at the end of the day, it's like, I think when people always say, work isn't everything. Of course it's not. And I wish our culture was better at that, because people on their deathbeds, their regrets are never, I really wish I would have worked more. No, it's, I wish I would have gone here. I wish I would have spent more time with my family. I wish I would have done this and that. And, losing my parents, they were in their 70s, and, they had just retired, and they didn't get to do, not that they didn't do things, but they were like, we want to do this, and they didn't get to do anything.
That's so true, because when my stepdad died, he passed when he was 60, and he was at type A. We talked about it. He was at the office at 7, came home at 5, walked in the yard until it got dark. My mom had to have a meat and 3 on the table by 6 p.m. And when my oldest daughter was born, it was like, when this happens, then this happens. And that generation was so true to that. It's like, when I save $50,000, then I'm going to do this. When I retire, then I'm going to do this. And so many of them, it's just, same as you. I don't want to be that way. Like, we're not promised tomorrow.
No, we're not. And, women, well, especially I think women, of course, we were always taught you can do anything, but you got to put yourself last. And then our parents also had that philosophy of first in, last out at work. I remember my dad telling me that. And when I was talking about, because in advertising, you kind of move around. That's how you would be promoted. Right. And my parents just found that completely crazy. Granted, my parents never worked in the corporate field. My dad was an orthodontist. My mother was a dental hygienist. So they didn't understand the corporate world, but they would just say things or like, suck it up, or that's how life is. That's how things are. And I remember being in my 20s and my 30s and like feeling like I was drowning and had no lifeline, and there was not, like, my parents didn't get it, you know, friends kind of got it, but we were all in the same spot. So it took a long time to get to the point where I was like, this is not how I want to live the rest of my life. And I'm not perfect at it. I'm always a work in progress.
Who
but
is?
I try every day.
Who is? And you're self-employed as well, aren't you? Yeah, so
yes.
We both are. And, you know, can you, like, for great example, my middle flew in from Pittsburgh last Monday, and so I was able to spend time with her Monday and Tuesday. Then we took off to Ohio on Wednesday, and, you know, for the holiday. But, you know, our parents would have never had the ability that you and I do to say, you know what, I'm going to get out of town, and the cool thing is, as long as I've got an internet connection and my laptop, I can work from wherever. Is it ideal? No. I still kind of like my routine and being in my groove and in my little home office. But our parents would have never been able to do that. They got 2 weeks of vacation a year, and however 12 federal holidays, however many federal holidays there were, and that was it.
Yeah, and since my, you know, parents own the business, like, if my dad wasn't working, that doesn't mean that, you know, more patients were coming in. And, you know, we used to want to go, like, we're like, Dad, why can't we go skiing? And he's like, well, if I break a leg, then there's no money. You know, of course, he was doom and gloom.
The martyr.
He wouldn't, like, go roller skating because if I break something, and I'm like, we'll just wheel you up to the chairs and you can still treat patients. But, you know, it was like a different pressure. But yeah, now we can connect from anywhere. It does make it sometimes harder to go, no, I'm going to disconnect. I'm going to take the vacation because
I'm doing that in September for 2 weeks. We're going to Greece, and it's like, I've already told, I'm like, I'm not taking my computer. I am going to start filling those, you know, 2 weeks of work now, so that it's, because we need to completely, you know, we're that generation that is both analog and digital. So, you know, it's very easy for us to remember what it was like to shut the laptop or turn it off or whatever, or not even have it. You know, do you remember the days, how nice it was when you left work for vacation and you're like, bye, Susie, I'll see you in a week and a half. And that was it. There was no checking your phone. Yes. There was no calling in. There was no voicemail. There was nothing. It was like, bye.
Exactly. And I remember we all started getting cell phones, and my job would want my cell phone. And I'm like, no, you can have my home phone number, but I'm not giving you my cell phone because I don't want to be that connected. And I even I learned this as being a freelancer, is I turn the email notifications off on my phone because I was getting clients. Sometimes they were in a different time zone, like I had a client in Australia, but I would get clients emailing me at night and I would see it. And then I'd be like, my mind would, and I'm like, no, I don't want to see it. And that's been that way for years. I will go in and check it, and sometimes I'll schedule an email. Otherwise, I'm like, you know what, that can wait till tomorrow because I need to have my time and I need to turn off work mode.
And I have, since I've been back in business for myself for the past 4 years. And when I first had my agency back in 2008, before I went, and then there was a company in between, I did that. It was always constant, like, oh, I've got to respond right now. I'm in social media and digital marketing. Can I tell you, in the 15 years that I've been doing this, how many emergencies I have had? One. And it's just, it doesn't, and I was like, no. And I had a client text me last week on the 4th. I was like, really? Boundaries. And, you know, I like that we have gotten better. And again, I think it's an age thing.
Yes.
As far as setting those boundaries and saying, no, it can wait. It can wait.
Yeah, and you have, and the thing is, you know, you I think it's good to start in one place, like maybe set them in work, but you also have to set them in your personal life with people that you're friends with or you're dating or whatever. But you also have to set them for yourself of like, this is what I will do. This is what I will not do. These are the times that I will, you know, be good to myself. I will like do the self-care. This is the time, you know, like I will take a rest and that's okay. Because, you know, like I love that I sometimes will take naps, and it's funny because when we were kids, we're like, oh, nap time, come on, or bedtime, and now I'm like, oh, please, can I have nap time in my day?
I wish I could nap. I can't nap. It takes me too long to get this to slow down, to be able to. So I've always found, and my family or the girls know, like if I'm taking a nap, I'm sick. But yeah, you're right. And watching TV, if I want to binge watch an entire series, I'm going to do it. I don't consider it lazy. I call it conserving energy. I am conserving my energy.
Yes, we don't have to do, appointment TV. Like, I mean, I do miss that where it was, you knew as a collective, like, nation or whatever, we were all watching this show or this episode, because if you didn't see it, you missed it. Maybe you could see it in the reruns. So I missed that a little bit. But we do, there are shows you've binge watch that everyone's talking about, and you can text your friends and be like, did you see this episode? Did you see that episode? And yeah, it is kind of a form of relaxation and self-care. And, I love to watch cult documentaries. My sister and I are both into them. I am fascinated. Yeah. Fascinated by cults. And, yeah, I don't care. It's my guilty pleasure.
We got to have them.
It's a weird guilty pleasure.
That's all right.
Yeah.
Summer for me is Big Brother. It's the most cheesy, campiest thing, but that's like our summer guilty pleasure. And it starts next Wednesday. And I can't wait. And it's so funny. We now have a pool. You know how you have a football betting pool? We do it for Big Brother. And now it used to just be me, Steve, and Cassie, the youngest. And now she's pulled like 3 of her friends in.
God, that's great. Did you ever, because Big Brother started right in England?
I think so.
Across the pond. I wonder the difference between how things are here versus.
So it's interesting you say that, because there's another show, The Trader, and it started in Australia. And so now they have like Australia, England, America, and there's one other version. And it's very interesting because we've watched them all now. It's interesting to see the difference between how the Americans do it, and not just like the show itself, but the people that are contestants. It's really kind of fascinating because it's definitely very different. And we also have the Olympics starting up. So let's talk about some fun stuff with Gen X. Speaking of TV, what was first of all, did you watch soaps after school?
I did when I was in college, more, and a little bit when I was younger. Like I said, both my parents worked, and we did have someone watching us. My brother was 4 years younger, and the woman that would we called her Aunt Frida. She was the loveliest woman. She watched soap, so we will sometimes watch those. My mother didn't really like it, but
Aunt Frida wanted to see them. So guess what, kids? We're watching.
She did.
We're watching soaps. Yeah, I was a big Guiding Light person. That was my thing. I was Guiding Light when everybody was General Hospital with the Luke and Laura years.
Alan Michael.
Yes!
I loved Alan Michael. And yes.
That was, and then of course, you had your, going back to what you were talking about with when we were, the TV Guide days, Friday night, it was, what was the show on before Dallas?
Was it Falcon Crest or
was it Dallas and then Fantasy? No. I'm thinking Saturday. Saturday night, Love Boat, then Fantasy Island.
Fantasy Island, yes. And when we were little, I remember it was the Muppet Show that was on. I think on Saturday night. Yeah.
And then on during the mornings. Were your parents early risers in the weekends?
My mother was. My dad not so much. He liked to kind of sleep in. But my mom, she would get up early. I'm like, don't you know how to sleep in? I'm a very bad sleeper, but I love to sleep in. But yeah, they were up. And my sister and brother would get up early to watch cartoons, and I was like, cartoons are for babies. And my sister's 16 months younger than me, and my brother, like I said, is 4 years. But I was just like, they're babies, and I just wanted to, I think I just wanted to have my own time alone. And
with 3 of you in the house, I can totally understand that. Yeah, because Saturdays, I was an only child. I grew up an only child. So that was, get up. And before my mom married my stepdad, but she did that when I was like 7 years old. So there weren't, she slept in. And I definitely was the go get yourself some cereal, sit in front of the and those days, it's innocent. I think that's the thing that that we're missing is, you didn't hear 24/7 of all the horrible things going on in our world. It just
so true.
So the whole self-care thing. So what are some of the ways that you intentionally practice self-care for you?
One of my favorite things to do, even though now it's like so hot, I love going outside and going for a walk. I live by this trail in Atlanta called the Beltline. It used to be a railroad track, and they turned it into a walking path. And which I started doing during the pandemic just to get outside. I would go take my dog and go for a walk, and I still love doing that. One, it's fun for people watching because there's some very interesting characters on the Beltline and some very annoying people as well who take the whole sidewalk. But I love being outside. I love going hiking. I don't do that as much as I can. I have a thing for rooftop bars, and I find that a self-care because I love sitting outside with an amazing cocktail and just looking out at the view. Spending time with my dog, my nieces and nephew. I love that I get to watch them grow up and hopefully still stay the cool aunt. My nephew sometimes is like, oh, so cringe, but I do it on purpose.
Of course, that's our job.
Of course it is. He's in junior high, and I remember junior high, and I'm like, I'm gonna try to speak the lingo. I don't understand a lot of their slang, but I will pick up on words and then I'll say it. And he's like, oh, so cringe. And I'm like, mission accomplished.
And the funny thing is they don't realize that we're doing it intentionally.
No, they will later. Yeah. I'm sure later he'll be like, writing in my journal. I love music. My dog hates my singing. The other night I'll do like the doom scroll, but I'll listen to they'll have 80s music come on and I'll start singing along, and he was like pawing me. Like,
no way.
Stop. Yeah, he was like cuddling, and he's like, every time he just put his, like, Mom, you're killing me. And I'm like, I don't think my voice is that bad.
And then you turn like, listen, I brought you home. I rescued you.
Exactly.
You have this wonderful life because of me. Right. Maybe he was trying to sing with you.
Yeah. Maybe. But yeah, I mean, which would be fine. Instead of just giving me the look like, maybe it's just my voice hurts his ears because of the level, whatever it is. But what else? Sleep is definitely self-care for me because I'm so bad at it that when I get a good night's sleep, or even just being lazy, like a lazy Sunday.
It's not lazy.
I'm not getting out of your
energy
pajamas.
Preservation.
No. True. Yes, but like not getting out of my pajamas all day, and unless obviously to take the dog out, but just reading, listening to podcasts, listening to audiobooks, binging, whatever, or doing absolutely nothing is like the best self-care.
The man travels largely during the week, so on the rare occasion that he leaves on like a Sunday, it is my heaven. And when I know this, I plan in advance, so I don't leave the house. And he typically takes really, really early flights, so I can sleep in as long as the dogs will let me, which lately has not been a very good thing. But then I know I can just get up. I don't have to get dressed. I can just putz, and I putz. That's my thing. That's what I love to do. Like where you kind of squirrel your way through the house. Mm-hmm. And you don't necessarily have a to-do list. It's like you start on one project and then you turn around and you go, oh, I can do that. Oh, look, I need to straighten up the whatever. And before you know it, you have all these little micro things. And I know it sounds really weird, but those are my favorite days. That just kind of random, that go with the flow, and there's no agenda. If you want to stop and have a mimosa on a Sunday, you can. If you want to eat cookie dough, you can. And you can do this every day. Right. But obviously, Monday through Friday, most of us do have some kind of professional obligations that we have to. So it's just not the same. It's just nice to have that day where you're just doing a whole lot of nothing.
Yep.
Yeah. An added bonus if it's bad weather. Because then you're like,
yes.
See? I can't leave.
A rainy Sunday. Yes. Love a rainy Sunday. It's the best.
This is God's way of telling me, stay home.
Exactly. Cozy up, watch something ridiculous, and doesn't have to be educational. It can be silly. And then, just cuddle up with your pets if you have them. And and just enjoy the time because, life is short, and sometimes you just need to stop and pause and realize that the act of not doing something is doing something for yourself.
Well, and I think too, going back to our parents, that whole, in first, early in, late out type attitude, and you need to stick around, you need to stay with that company and get your gold watch, is that we realize that if we were working in a traditional corporate job, we want to quit, we give them the common courtesy of a 2-week notice, right? But if they want to get rid of us, I mean, boom, you're done.
Yeah.
You're done tomorrow. You're done today. And here's your, we need all of your stuff. And they won't think twice about it. And to think that, I think it's a very interesting moment when you finally realize that everyone is replaceable, because definitely feeling that you're irreplaceable is a youth thing, and definitely into your 20s. And then I don't know if it takes that first time getting fired or laid off or whatever that you go, and you're just like, I'm not. And that's another cool thing about our generation, is we were definitely the generation that said, there is no company loyalty, and that was really hard for our parents to get. And it sounds like that exactly with your folks, and it was the same with my mom and stepdad. It was like, you've got to stay, and you can't be bouncing around. And I'm like,
sometimes you're forced to do that. And funny enough, like, my dad was the one that suggested I go into advertising. When I was younger, I wanted to be a marine biologist and work with beluga whales. But then, because I had childhood asthma, I found out I couldn't dive anymore because it was like a very serious health risk. And so
breathing.
He was like, you're really good. You're creative. Yes, breathe. I didn't want to like go diving and then have an air bubble. I'm like, yeah, I want to be able to have a life. And my dad's like, you're creative. You like to write. So what about advertising? Thanks so much, Dad. Because it's a very hard career that isn't stable. And I remember the first agency I was at, of course, started my career at the time when the dot-com bubble burst. So, of course, advertising goes. And I went to lunch and came back. And in the time I was gone, there was a mass layoff at my agency. So I came back to see my friends crying. And, after the agency had told us, no, everything's fine. Because all around, I was living in Chicago, all around agencies were laying people off. Like, we're fine. No. And I later got laid off in a subsequent layoff, but it was like I was like, oh my gosh, this is scary. So yeah, we went through the recession. We went through with 9/11, like we've been through things. People forget that every generation goes through things, but
we've been through a lot of things.
We've been
through a lot of things. And the number of things that we have been through is really kind of the reason why we are such a tough nut generation. It's like, let me have it. You can't.
Right?
Go ahead.
Yeah.
What next?
Exactly.
And there was a question I was going to ask you, talking about. I'll think about brain fart. But yeah, I mean, that's the reason we are the FAFO, as they like to say, the F around and find out generation. It's like, you cannot hurt me anymore. We were latchkey kids. We had the whole, have you seen me? The milk carton things. We had the 11 o'clock announcement that came across the TV. Parents, do you know where your children are? It's like, well, God, I hope you do. I mean, the recession. We had, the war. There's so many things. It's like, no wonder we're all just twisted individuals. I mean...
Yeah, and we watched the space shuttle blow up live, and our parents were like, we didn't have discussions about, how do you feel about that? No. I mean, because I remember going, those, yes, kids were watching, but the kids of those astronauts, especially the teacher, watch their parents explode. And I was just like, I remember thinking that, no discussion.
Nothing.
We're just, And we would watch the news at night. Granted,
the teachers that wheeled the AV card in just turned it off.
It's fine.
Okay, pull out your books and turn to chapter 4.
And keep going. We're like, what? And we would watch the news at night, right? And we'd see all the bad things happening. I don't remember my parents ever going, so what do you think and how are you feeling? No, it was like, it's nice that you have feelings about whatever it is, whether it's the world or your own life, but keep doing. Go do the dishes. Go do your homework.
You'll be fine. Get a good night's sleep. You'll be fine.
You'll be fine.
Just minor flesh wound. And then think about it. But yet we, having then like our young adult years be in the 90s, that was a pretty cool time, right? Pretty cool time.
It was.
And then we got gobsmacked with frickin' 9/11.
Yes.
And you're just like, and I truly think that if any of us had any innocence and grandiose ideas that the world was a wonderful place, that came crashing down then. I distinctly, because we were living in Pennsylvania, and I was terrified because I was like, how did this happen in America? Like, I was just so, and I really think, at least for me, if where that, I won't call it bitter point, but by that point I was like 33, was like, it truly the end of innocence. Whatever, and I had small children. My youngest wasn't even born. My middle had just been born 6 months before, and you're just like, oh my God. And so, definitely know life has never been the same, since we grew up. But it definitely, whatever innocence.
No, because before that, I mean, yes, the World Trade Center had been bombed, I think, in the 90s. But before that, the only time America was under attack was Pearl Harbor, and that was so far removed. And then 9/11, and it was so horrible because we're watching it in live time happening. And then our country really has changed. And I was just, we went to New York. It was my niece and nephew's first time in New York. So of course, because I lived there, I had to go. And we went to the 9/11 memorial. And it's the first time that I've been to something that's historical, where I'm like, I lived through this.
Did you cry?
This has a completely different impact. No, I didn't, but it was very, everyone, it was the only time somewhere it was like very quiet, but also I'm like, this is a grave site. I'm walking on a grave site. And I actually I moved to New York right after 9/11, and a friend of mine, we went and worked at the respite centers for the Red Cross. So I was down there twice and saw the change in the work, the emergency workers from like optimistic to totally defeated. And I remember the smell and I remember everything. But yeah, it was like that. I know, for kids to see that were younger, it has to have an impact. But as an adult, I think we had a better understanding of like, okay, America isn't, we can be attacked. Like, and what's going to happen? And it wasn't a good point. And even now today, I'm like, what is going on with, not to get political, what is going on with our country?
But that kind of goes back to, I'm just going to call it what it is, the BS that we were fed as kids growing up. This is the greatest country in the world. You can do anything you want to do. You can be anything. You can, if you work hard, you can have all the things that you want. And the reason why I asked if you cried is because I'm a pretty tough nut. Like, I'm very, not a lot of emotion. And that, going down that escalator, I just remember I was almost hyperventilating, not like crying, but I was just like in tears, and I was just like, I had to take a lot of deep breaths.
Yeah, I mean, I felt myself, but I was my niece and nephew are almost 13 and almost 11. I didn't want to like cry in front of them because my nephew has studied it. My niece was asking a lot of questions, but yeah, I could feel myself. I'm like, I'm glad I saw it. I never want to go there again.
No, I agree. It's
yeah.
hard. It's very. I almost think that has to be our equivalent of our parents if your dad served. The time that I took my dad, who was a Vietnam vet, to the wall. It has to be a very similar reaction that you get out of that. We're hammering in on 33 minutes. So let's do some pop culture real quick, and then we're going to sign off. So back to the 80s. Favorite band?
Duran.
Who were you going to marry?
Simon Le Bon. I wanted the lead
Roger.
singer.
I was the drummer.
Yeah. And then I would say Depeche Mode became my second favorite, where my sister and brother would call them Depressed Mode. They still do, but I don't care. I love them anyways.
For me, it was the Police. And yeah, it's so funny just listening to all of these bands. So are you aware there's a thing called the 80s Cruise?
Yes.
And I really want
to go.
I really want to go. But you have to
fun.
Get your reservations like a year in advance. And I just every year I look at all the different bands and artists that are going to be on. I'm like, that would be so much fun. That would be a party boat.
Definitely. Gen X, we know how to party.
Yeah,
we do.
Yeah, and I was just with, I think it was my middle, and I was having this conversation. We were doing the whole, were we at a bar? Oh yes, it was a going away party for one of my friends, and the topic of Fireball. Fireball came up, and I was standing there with another Gen Xer, and we're like, yeah, but when we were partying, ours had gold flakes in it, 24-karat gold. Goldschlager.
Goldschlager. Yes. That was because I wouldn't do a mind eraser, and some of the, I was like, the Rumple Mints. I'm like, but Goldschlager, I thought I was so sophisticated because of the gold flake. And that stuff tasted disgusting. It was like cough medicine, but, it had gold in it. So look how cool I am.
Anytime any of the kids are doing, like, Fireball, I'm like, you rookies. Ours had gold in it.
Right.
Because we're so...
Or the kids that are like, I'm going to try Everclear. And I'm like, are you insane? We didn't drink it straight. Yeah. And then they're like spitting it out. And it's like, we put it in things because we weren't that dumb. Or we're dumb and then we learned better.
Hurricane parties. Yeah. Hello, hurricane punch. Yeah. Put it in the bathtub.
Exactly.
The disgusting things that we did. It's like, would you ever now say, hey, give me a cup of that juice out of the bathtub?
Nope. Also, because I know if I had one cup of that, I'd probably feel real bad. Who knows? At this point in my life, I'm like, one drink can put me in bed for a day. 4 drinks, I'm fine. I don't, you never know. So, not that I want 4 drinks, but it's like...
You just never know where it's going to go.
You're guessing.
Okay, Blythe, this was fun. This was a lot of fun. So I'm going to sign off, and then you and I can continue towards the end. And so everybody, thank you so much. Thank you, Blythe, for joining us and taking a couple of trips down memory lane. Almost in quite a few decades did we touch on tonight. So everybody, thanks for listening. And until the next time we meet, may your drinks be strong and your will be stronger. See ya. As the saying goes, you don't have to go home, but you can't stay here. And that's a wrap for this week's episode. A big thanks to my guests for sharing their story and to you for listening. Don't forget to share the show with your friends and spread the words. And if you'd like to be a guest on the show, the link is in the show notes. Till next time, cheers.